time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram.
One result of Donald Trump's victory is that business CEOs are rethinking their obeisance to the Democratic left.
As Mark says in that video, what we're doing today is we're getting back to our roots and free expression.
The latest example is Meta, which has 3.2 billion people using its services, and the welcome decision to abandon its censorship regime by walking back most of the platform's speech controls.
Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship.
In its early years, Facebook took a hands-off approach to moderating content. But after the 2016 election, Democrats lambasted the platform for not doing more to remove Russian disinformation, which they claimed helped Mr. Trump win. Facebook then established an opaque system in which certified third parties, such as media outlets and non-profits, fact-checked posts. Those rated misleading or false were demoted in user feeds. The left-wing bias in fact-checks spurred a conservative backlash.
The chief executives of these big social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, and Google, they'll be appearing before Congress on October the 28th, before the election. Are you going to press them to have their liability imposed upon them for what they publish? Make them into
Well, if you get rid of Section 230, that's the end of them.
A year earlier, 2019, and Mr. Zuckerberg had tried to calm the furies by committing to free speech.
More people across the spectrum believe that achieving the political outcomes that they think matter is more important than every person having a voice and being heard. And I think that that's dangerous.
But as the winds in Washington continued to blow left, so did the platform's speech police. After the January 6th Capitol riot, the platform banned Mr. Trump. Then it suppressed contrarian views related to COVID that Democrats deemed misinformation, often with no explanation.
We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
Legal discovery in Murphy versus Missouri revealed how Meta executives bowed to demands by Biden officials to censor, quote, misinformation.
In his ruling that was handed down yesterday, he described the censorship effort as almost like the Ministry of Truth from Oceana in the George Orwell novel.
There is no loyalty except loyalty to the party. There is no love except love of Big Brother.
The Supreme Court ruled that the plaintiffs didn't prove that they were censored in direct response to government pressure, but the case did expose the collusion that existed between the Biden administration and big tech.
Over the last 4 years, we saw a lot of societal and political pressure all in the direction of more content moderation, more censorship, and we've got a real opportunity now. We've got a new administration and a new president coming in.
Meta says it will end its third-party fact-checking in the US and adopt a similar system to Elon Musk.
So the idea was they're independent fact-checkers, but they've just been too biased, and so what we're going to do instead is adopt a system like X has of community notes. So we're just going to rely on our own community of users to provide people more information about what they're seeing.
In other words, counter bad speech with more speech.
They've just become too restrictive over time about what people can say, including about those kind of sensitive topics that you mentioned that people want to discuss and debate. Immigration, trans issues, gender. We want to make it so that, bottom line, if you can say it on TV, you can say it on the floor of Congress, you certainly ought to be able to say it on Facebook and Instagram without fear of censorship.
Interestingly, Meta is also following Mr. Musk's lead by moving its content review teams out of California to Texas and other US locations.
I think that it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams.
Meta is also reversing a policy of suppressing political content in user feeds, something that's been of particular frustration to news organizations, including us.
One of the things we've experienced is that when you have a U.S. president and administration that's pushing for censorship, it just makes it open season for other governments around the world that don't even have the protections of the First Amendment to really put pressure on U.S. companies. We're going to work with President Trump to push back on that kind of thing around the world.
Such changes may in part be motivated by Meta's desire to get on the right side of Republicans, who will soon control Washington and head off regulation. But Mr. Zuckerberg, no doubt, is also responding to the message that voters sent by electing Mr. Trump. Stop the progressive imperialism. Some conservatives have called for increased regulation of social media platforms on grounds that they are de facto public squares. But Messrs. Musk and Zuckerberg are showing how markets, including the political markets, are solving the censorship problem. More government speech control would just make it worse.